what is the difference between information architecture and card sorting in the design process? They kind of do seem the same according to this student. Please explain it with examples. They might kind of sound similar in the process that it follows. Like they kind of have the same end goal in that, and that is to create a product that you can properly visualize in terms of UI UX designing principles. But to better understand the difference between the two, I'd like to just like talk about a few points that personally the UI UX team have given to me to kind of share with you guys. So I'll firstly cover the definition of the information architecture and card sorting, and further we'll move along to understand some examples for you guys. So, firstly, information architecture is like a blueprint, which is a visual representation of the product's infrastructure or maybe the features, the hierarchy, basically the whole kind of layout. It basically describes the level of detail as to how you want to visualize your product. So that kind of covers your entire architecture, and that's why it's kind of called information architecture. So basically it can include everything, or it can include maybe a few important kind of abstract information, but basically this lays the foundation of how you want your final product to look and visualize, and it will also contain the various different types of behaviors or the different types of content that you want to include in your application or your product, and the flow of how your entire product will work. And I'll get into more deeper with a better example. And one thing to note about information architecture is that there is no set limit to the size or the shape of your architecture. It can be really big, can be small. The main goal is that it should pretty much encompass a generalized structure of the entire product that you're kind of making. So in the future, let's say if anyone were to read it or take a look at your information architecture, they would be able to understand the ins and outs of your product that you have made. A little bit more about it, to kind of take it in a more generalized definition. It kind of gives the UI UX designers a bird's eye view, you could say, of the entire layout of the product, and it's all encompassed in one single document or PDF. And it has to be simple and easy to understand or represent how your entire product will work. And I'll get into an example of information architecture also, but this is basically what information architecture kind of entails, and it's basically the layout of your entire product all in one particular document in a kind of format of maybe boxes and arrows, kind of a flow diagram of sorts. And then comes the card sorting. So to keep it simple, card sorting is kind of making a site easy to use, is organizing the information so that people can find what they are looking for. So it's basically made to for ease of use. Basically, that's what card sorting is mainly used. So the main difference that you can kind of note between information architecture and card sorting is that the architecture consists of your entire product's design, whereas card sorting is kind of used in is a design principle that will kind of help improve how your product will be visually appealing to the users, and it's a kind of optimization on how to organize the content on your product. And I'll also explain this as an example. So basically what card sorting entails is that a UX researcher will kind of gather a group of users, potential users of their product to be made. Or it doesn't have to be potential users, it can be pretty much any person with the right knowledge with respect to what they are kind of making. So the UX researcher will gather all these various different types of people in a group or individuals, or yeah, they can either get them in a group or maybe individually interview them. And what they'll do is they'll have various different labels written on a bunch of note cards that basically state various different kinds of criteria that would make sense to them. And basically the goal of card sorting, which is in the name in itself, is that it uncovers how the target audience domain knowledge is structured, and it will serve to create an information architecture that matches the user's expectations. So once again, I used information architecture, that word, in the definition of card sorting as well. And the key difference between this information architecture and the information architecture definition above is that this information architecture with respect to card sorting is developed basically on the users or the target audiences kind of intuition or knowledge, whereas the above information architecture is based on the UI and UX's personal research in the field and what their assumptions on how the product should look like. So these are two key kind of design processes that are both used interchangeably or hand in hand during the entire product designing phase. Now I'll quickly take you through kind of two different examples of the entire process. This is just a basic understanding, and you can see how really it's kind of big, but it's kind of encompassed in a very small single document, and it encompasses the entire product's explanation from the starting of the flow to the ending of the flow, the various different types of features that this application provides, and a legend to kind of help you understand what each different type of node does. And there are a bunch of arrows to kind of showcase how the flow works and how the application should ideally function or be used. So in the future, if you take it or I take it, it is pretty easy to understand just by looking at each individual node and understand how this application kind of works. So this entire perspective is made based on the UI and UX's personal research that they kind of did on their own, and they kind of made this entire setup. Now the same process can be done with your card sorting, except this is kind of the end product of card sorting where you would get your information architecture. However, one step before this is your card sorting, where you have various different kinds of cards or fields that the users who have the domain specific knowledge will kind of sort for you guys, and then you will eventually make an information architecture based on the cards that they sorted earlier. So quickly, to just give you a brief example of how card sorting works, I'll give you an example of a car rental site. So as an example of a car rental site, we have a website wherein which a company, any car rental company, would offer various different kinds of vehicles, like maybe 60s, 100 types of different vehicle models from different years, different colors, different kinds of feature sets that the customers can basically choose from. So how would a UI or a UX researcher organize such a huge amount of data of different types of vehicle models into different types of categories that people can then browse quickly to find their ideal car rental, basically what they would want in a particular car. Now, the company might use technical terms such as to kind of distinguish between various different types of cars, like maybe the car family, the executive car, or a full size luxury car, depending on what the user kind of wants. And but your users might have no idea of the difference between some of these categories. And this type of distinguishing, or these categories are basically decided by the company. And if the company is not sure whether the users will understand what this different categories might mean, this is where you would get to use your card sorting design process. So with respect to adding card sorting to this application, your company can basically, or your UX researcher to be more precise, can ask or organize a bunch of users with the domain specific knowledge with relation to different types of vehicles, cars, and all that kind of knowledge into groups to be able to make sense of these categories, and then maybe they can either add on to new categories, change up the way they name those categories, maybe add some few definitions, or maybe add even more new different types of categories. So pretty much that is how card sorting can help in creating a much more better information architecture. And so, in kind of to close off with this question, I'll kind of just explain how this entire process kind of goes from the start to the finish, and to get a final grade product with respect to card sorting. So initially, your UX researcher would choose a set of topics, then organize a bunch of users or groups of people to kind of organize the topics into various different groups, and the user then names those groups according to what they think is the ideal name that everyone can understand. Finally, they debrief the user, and if needed, the user asks for a more practical group sizes, and then you can kind of repeat this and analyze the data finally to make your information architecture. So this is how the entire process goes.